What is up, Baseball Nation? Welcome to Fan Interference, a Major League Baseball podcast where we discuss the latest news and storylines from around the league. My name is Joey, and I will be your host today. You can find me on Twitter at Major League Joey, and soon you might even find some YouTube content under the same name. And when I say soon, I mean real soon. I just finished recording the first episode of a new series that I'll be doing on MLB The Show, where we take a franchise and we try to run with it and see what we can do in a realistic way. I won't spoil what team it is. When it comes out, you can take a look on YouTube under Major League Joey. But this episode of the podcast, episode 3, was recorded on August 20th, 2021. They say everyone loves an underdog. David versus Goliath, Robin Hood versus the elite, Frodo and Sam in The Lord of the Rings. In the world of sports, we have the U.S. men's ice hockey team in the 1980 Winter Olympics versus the evil Empire. They say everyone loves an underdog, but is it really true? And if so, is competitive balance actually not worth pursuing because we'd eliminate major underdogs and in the process kill compelling storylines? In baseball, there's no hard salary cap, and there are even big market teams that are choosing to pay taxes to smaller teams if it means that they can just get away with signing just one more big free agent. Like a junkie trying to score one last hit. And Rob Manfred, he's attempting to pass through a new rule under the collective bargaining agreement, which would set a minimum team payroll of $100 million. Are payrolls really such a big issue in baseball? What does this mean for underdogs, top dogs, dark horses, other animals, and Cinderella stories? That is what is coming up next on Fan Interference. Loving an underdog story has to be real. I know, I experience it all the time. The New York Giants winning 2 Super Bowls against the New England Patriots is the perfect example. Remember the first of those 2 series? The Patriots went 16 wins, 0 losses in the regular season for the first and only 16-game perfect season in NFL history. The New York Giants? They didn't even win their division. They were 10 wins, 6 losses, and they had to earn their way to the Super Bowl by winning a wild card game on the road. A divisional playoff game against their division leader, the Dallas Cowboys. That was also on the road. And then they had to win the NFC Championship game against the 13-3 Packers in overtime. Oh yeah, also on the road. Now that all 3 of those improbable things happened, the New York Giants had only one thing in their way. Tom Brady and the undefeated New England Patriots. And you know how it ended. It was one of the greatest Cinderella stories in sports history. The second time the New York Giants defeated the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl, the Giants had a .500 win percentage in the regular season. That would be like if somehow the season ended today and the Angels met the Dodgers in the World Series and the Angels won despite having basically a .500 winning percentage. Now, we know that won't happen. It pretty much couldn't happen. The Angels are in 4th place and they're 10 games back from the Astros. It just goes to show how amazing the upset that the New York Giants pulled off was, and how amazing upsets are in general. And that's why we love them so much as fans. But we don't need to look at only sports to understand this. We have expectations about a lot of things. And when we have low expectations for something, we normally aren't surprised when they're unpopular. And we have high expectations about other things, and if people hold an opinion that's in line with that high expectation, no one really cares. The point is, expectations play a major role in how people perceive the world of sports and the world around us. I mean, sometimes I know of a band and they're not that popular, and there's a song that I particularly like, and the moment one of my friends comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm interested in this band," or "I just heard this new song, you gotta check it out," and I realize that I'm not the only person who likes this underdog of a band or this underdog of a song, I immediately get defensive. And I'm sort of annoyed that somebody else likes my underdog Cinderella story of a band or a song. Why don't we bring this back into the world of baseball, and let's create a theoretical World Series. The Los Angeles Dodgers, the big Dodgers, the super team, the team that everybody knows and expects to be in the World Series. Imagine they're playing the Baltimore Orioles. Literally every single person that's not in Los Angeles would be rooting for the Baltimore Orioles. Some would root for them because they are the most improbable of teams to make it to the World Series, and it's just kind of cool that Baltimore Orioles are back in the World Series. But some would root for them because they're sick and tired of Los Angeles Dodgers being the super team that they've been over the last few years. Have you ever heard the expression, "everybody loves to hate the king"? We see it play out almost every day. Think about the restaurant McDonald's. Every time you talk to one of your friends and you suggest to them maybe we should go to McDonald's, more and more frequently, people are saying things like, "Oh, I don't like to go to McDonald's. I prefer to go to XYZ restaurant. If you're talking to somebody in the West Coast, they'll tell you In-N-Out Burger. Maybe if you're talking to somebody on the East Coast, they'll say Five Guys Burgers and Fries or Shake Shack. And maybe you've got that friend that'll say, I like to get chicken down at Chick-fil-A. But the reality is that McDonald's is the primary restaurant. It's the restaurant that serves the most people in the United States. And it's not even close. It's by far the most popular restaurant. Yet, everyone seems to suggest they don't like McDonald's. Everyone seems to hate on McDonald's. And it comes back to that principle. Everyone loves to hate the king. I mean, look at the NBA. The last NBA Finals had two teams that no one really cared about. Barely anybody watched it. A good underdog story can't have two underdogs. That's just fundamentally not allowed by the rules of underdogs. The worst thing that could happen to the NBA did happen last year. LeBron's Lakers and Durant's Brooklyn Nets didn't make the NBA Finals. One of them had to make the finals. If they had, the viewership would have been much higher. Because LeBron and Durant, well, they're the kings. And everyone loves to hate the king. So what does this have to do with payrolls? Rob Manfred seems to think there's a need to force teams to hit a minimum payroll. First, let's take a look at a psychological study that was conducted, and I think there's some key takeaways from it that I want to use as a starting point for my conversation on payrolls. In 2020, there was a study at the Academy of Management Journal entitled "The Underdog Effect: When Low Expectations Increase Performance." Someone wrote about it in the Harvard Business Review, and there were three takeaways from this study. The first takeaway: there is support for the positive relationship between underdog expectations and performance. What does that mean? That means when you perceive someone to be an underdog, or when someone is perceived to be an underdog, they typically outperform that expectation. The second takeaway: the desire to prove others wrong is one of the key factors in driving this positive relationship. Anecdotally, in interviews, this idea has been reinforced by both LeBron James and Michael Jordan, each having on separate occasions spoken to the fact that in their mind, before a game, they conjure up and create a critic. They create a doubter in their mind who says that you can't do it, you can't win this game, you won't make that shot. And then what do? They set out to prove that person wrong. They have a desire to disprove someone who doesn't even exist, and that helps drive their performance. The third takeaway in the study: the credibility of an observer is critically important. If the observer is viewed as somebody who's credible, when they put the expectation that someone is an underdog on them, it actually undermines their performance. You could think of the golem effect. It's also sort of referred to as the self-fulfilling prophecy principle. If someone is really credible and tells you that they think you're going to fail, generally speaking, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fail. But if the observer who points somebody out and says, that person, that athlete, that team is an underdog, if that person that calls them out is not credible, well, then the underdog team will likely have a boost in performance. So if a fan who maybe the last time he played baseball was his local Little League team, he never played even in middle school or high school, travel ball, never played at the collegiate level, not even on a club baseball team, probably doesn't even play softball, but he's going out there and he's insulting some major league team or some major league player, well, the major league team and the major league player knows that person's not credible, and it oftentimes fuels them. If you've never seen it before, there are actually these YouTube videos of fans that are heckling Bryce Harper, and it's really funny because, first and foremost, just as a side tangent, Bryce Harper is an elite talent in the game, and he always has been. He had one season that was not that good, but every other season he's ever had has been amazing, and currently he's in the discussion for being one of the front runners for the National League MVP, and for good reason. He's a great player. He hits for average, he has a decent on-base percentage, he plays great defense, he plays hard every single day, he seems to be super clutch, he hits home runs, and he's an RBI machine. What's not to like about Bryce Harper? Well, if you ask a lot of fans, there's a lot of things not to like about Bryce Harper. He's one of the most heckled players out there. And so there are these videos on YouTube, they're really funny, you should check them out, of people heckling him, and then immediately he goes up to the plate, he hits a home run, and he stares the person down, or he jabbers back at them, and he starts getting into a fight with the fan, insulting them. It's really funny. So it's a great illustration of this exact principle. If the person who's telling you should be an underdog, or that you're, not quite as good as people think you are, oftentimes that fuels you. So building off that third takeaway, I have a question. Does Rob Manfred have a point when he presupposes that payroll inequalities promote a less competitive league? If I as a fan view a team as an underdog because they don't spend a lot of money on players, is that alone, in and of itself, a good reason to view the team as an underdog? Do payrolls even correlate to wins? Well, let's take a look. If the season ended today, 10 teams would make the playoffs. Tampa Bay Rays, Houston Astros, Chicago White Sox, New York Yankees, Oakland Athletics, San Francisco Giants, Milwaukee Brewers, Atlanta Braves, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the San Diego Padres. 3 of those teams, the Brewers, the Rays, and the Athletics, are below the league average payroll of $130 million. And 2 of the other teams are basically very close to the average payroll. That's the Atlanta Braves and the Chicago White Sox. Basically, what does that boil down to? That means that half of the teams that are in the playoffs are basically average or below average in spending. And the other half of the playoff picture, well, they're definitively above average. So it seems on the surface that payroll sort of doesn't matter that much. The difference between the highest spenders, the Dodgers, and the second highest spenders, the New York Yankees, is $64 million. That difference is pretty close to the total payroll of the Tampa Bay Rays. Yet the Rays have a better record than both of the 2 wildcard teams that I just mentioned, the Dodgers and the Yankees. The Oakland Athletics and the Arizona Diamondbacks have almost identical payrolls, yet one team is in the playoffs and the other has a .336 winning percentage. If payroll were a good indicator of performance, it seems to be doing a poor job showing it. And if underdogs are a function of the expectations we have for a team's performance, payroll should have essentially nothing to do with it. Have you noticed that the only current division leaders that have the highest payroll in their division are the Chicago White Sox and Houston Astros? And the American League Central is arguably the most boring division in baseball. And the Astros, they only outspend the Angels by $10 million. So they're only $10 million off from not being the division leader with the highest payroll. The Rays have the lowest payroll in the American League East, but they're the division leader. The Braves are atop the NL East, even though both the Mets and the Phillies massively outspend them. The Brewers lead the National League Central, and they have a payroll under $100 million. That's the minimum threshold that Rob Manfred is fighting for. While the Brewers' competitors, the St. Louis Cardinals, they spend about $70 million more. Even the Chicago Cubs, after trading away nearly every good player they have, still spend almost $50 million more than the Brewers. And the San Francisco Giants, they have seemingly shocked everyone. Maybe not Giants fans, but basically everyone else has been shocked by what the San Francisco Giants have accomplished this year. And they have led the Dodgers for most of the season. The Dodgers spend nearly $120 million more on payroll. The difference between the Dodgers payroll and the Giants payroll is literally greater than the proposed minimum by Rob Manfred. Yet, the Giants have a better record than the Dodgers. The reality is, there's absolutely no truth to the idea that payroll is correlated with success. Payroll doesn't even predict if a game will be competitive. Payroll is a reality of front offices that fans hold on to as a crutch. But there's just no truth to it being an important performance indicator. In fact, if you do a linear regression, you actually find that 12% of the changes in a team's performance align with changes in payroll. That means 88% is completely unexplained by payroll. Let me put it this way. The new rule might make fans feel better. A Cleveland Indians fan might feel like they have a better shot now that they have a higher payroll at the new minimum of $100 million. But they'll still be at the bottom of the league when it comes to payroll. Nothing will have changed about their relative position. The Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, they're not going to stop spending big just because the Cleveland Indians now spent $100 million. The only thing that might happen is there might be a change in perception for the fans. And hey, that might have some value. I just hope that this change in perception doesn't take away from how exciting it will be when the underdog that is the Cleveland Guardians go on to win a World Series. Now that would be a Cinderella story. Well, I thank you for listening to today's podcast. Today was August 20th, 2021. It was the third episode of Fan Interference, a Major League Baseball podcast where we discuss the latest news and storylines from around the league. My name is Joey. You can find me on Twitter at Major League Joey. And perhaps soon there might be some YouTube content coming out under the same name. I thank you so much, and until next time.